Hi, welcome back to the Very Good Gardening Podcast. I'm Kristen McCoy, and today we are officially shifting gears. I'm not dreaming about the garden anymore, I am preparing for it, and there's a very big difference. Today I'm going to talk about all of the things I do before I plant anything. The cleanup, the planning, the organizing, the soil work, the seedlings, the potatoes, all of it. If you've been getting the itch to get out in the garden but you haven't been quite sure where to start, this episode is your checklist. Before we jump in, if you would like to support the podcast in a really cool way, head on over to my Fourth Wall shop where there's some really awesome shirts. I just got 3 new designs in, and one of them I'm wearing today because spring mode is activated. And if you're looking for full harvest to table recipes for when your garden is a success, head on over to my BonusView. There's a free preview video that'll explain exactly what my BonusView is all about. All right, let's get into it. Let's get ready for garden season. Before I do anything, I always start with a garden walkthrough. Just today, the snow is finally starting to melt, so I took a little notepad and I walked around the garden just to see what's going on. First, I could not believe, but I actually have carrots and lettuce still growing in my cold frames. I was absolutely shocked. I also noticed that all of my garlic made it through the super harsh winter temps, which I was surprised as well about that. My blueberries are starting to put buds out. I just can't believe that everything survived the super harsh winter. I thought that if any winter was going to be the one, this was going to be it to kill off everything in my garden. But nope, nature finds a way. As I was walking through, I was also looking for any damage that I might see. Specifically, I was looking at my fences and my garden beds, seeing if anything didn't quite hold up. I definitely found a couple of fences that needed to be mended, but I actually think that my garden beds are okay for right now. We'll see how they look in a couple of months as well. I'm the kind of person that I like to actually physically write things down, so I took a notepad, but if you're more likely to put that on your phone, go ahead. I just find that I actually get things done and I remember things when I write them down physically. Maybe that's just me being old. It's probably me being old. I'm also looking for any plants that I need to take out. Every fall, I think to myself, okay, I am going to make sure that I clean up my garden so that it's nice and refreshed and I don't have to do any of that work in the spring, and every fall, I don't do it. I look at it as the equivalent of going to sleep with your makeup on. You shouldn't do it, but sometimes you do it anyway. This fall just got way too busy and we really didn't have any time to clean up the garden before it was super cold outside. And with both of us being teachers, we don't really have that much time after school before it starts to get really dark. I know you're probably thinking, okay, excuses, and you're right, we didn't do it. So now I've got to clean up all that mess. I'm looking at taking out plants that I should have taken out a long time ago, like corn stalks and Brussels sprouts. I'm also looking for any small tools that I've left around the garden. If you know me, you know that I lose snippers at least once a week, and usually I'm going to find them in the spring. I'm looking for any cages that I left out. I actually think that I pulled in most of the cages last year, but I'm sure that there's a cage or two that I've forgotten. I do leave some dead plants in my garden so that insects can actually hibernate in them over the winter. And then in the spring, I just cut them down and I leave the roots in the soil because they'll just decompose right there. Also, leaving all the roots in the soil allows all of the healthy microbes to be able to stay in there undisturbed. I've been doing that for the last 3 or 4 years and my soil health has been fantastic, so I'm going to keep doing that. Now, any plants that I am taking out of my garden, I'm going to do one of 2 things with them. First, if it was diseased, it comes out of my garden and it comes off of my property entirely. This is not something that I want to stick around, so I'm going to take it off my property. Now, I will say that if I have a diseased plant that has been in my garden all winter, it's probably not going to make a difference if I take it out in the spring. So I really do try to make sure that I take all diseased plants off of my property before it gets too cold. There shouldn't be anything diseased in there, but I am just saying this for you, that if you know a plant has been in your garden all winter and it had a whole bunch of disease on it, take it out before the spring comes. The next thing that I'm going to do with all of those healthy plants that died, I'm going to put them into the compost. I actually have 2 bays for compost. I wish I had a third, but that's coming. And one of them is going to be where it's constantly breaking down, and then the other one is going to be one that is ready to be used. Now, I will make sure that all of those corn stalks do not have any kernels in them, or else I'll have a ton of corn just popping up all over my garden. I definitely do not want that. I'm also going to be looking at any pots or grow bags that I left out over the winter, which I did lots of them. But I'm going to be taking out any of the soil, putting it into the compost, or I'm going to see if maybe I can reuse that soil. Sometimes I like to take that soil, put it into a big wheelbarrow, and then I'll add a little compost or other nutrients and then put it right back into the pots. That's worked really well for me, and it helps me not waste the soil. Putting it into the compost is probably not going to waste it either, but I can reuse it right away this way. Another really big no-no that I do every single year is that I leave my irrigation systems all winter. This is something that I am so bad at it. Please learn from my mistakes and find the time to clean up your irrigation systems before the winter comes. But since I did not do that, I will be taking them all down and be putting them in the shed until I'm ready to use them in the spring. I'm also probably going to be testing them when the weather gets consistently above freezing and seeing which ones I need to replace. This cleanup is really going to help my garden feel refreshed and help me be more prepared to plant in that soil. The next thing I'm going to do is head over to my asparagus beds. Now, my asparagus is probably going to be popping up within the next month or so, which is so cool. I'm so excited. But I need to make sure that those beds are prepared for that asparagus. Right now, the ferns from last year's spears are grown and they went to seed. They ferned out, which is so cool. It's really neat how asparagus grows. I let that stay like that in those beds until right about now. I'm going to take out all those ferns and any weeds that I see. Then I'm going to heavily mulch it. That mulch is going to help those weeds stay suppressed, and it's going to help the soil regulate its moisture, giving the perfect conditions for the asparagus spears to pop up in the spring. It's really important that I don't rake or till any of that soil because those crowns are right underneath the soil, maybe about 3 or 4 inches underneath, and I don't know exactly where they are. So I don't want to risk accidentally disturbing any of those crowns that have been growing there for about 5 years now. When maintained properly, asparagus patches can last for 20 or more years. And since we really like asparagus, I would like for that to be the case for us. Speaking of taking care of long-term plants, I'm going to head over to my raspberry patch next. Now, in my raspberry patch, I did something that a lot of people say you shouldn't do, and I mixed red and black raspberries. I actually haven't really found this to be a huge problem. My red raspberries are trying to take over my black raspberries, but as far as diseases go, I haven't really seen an issue with that. But if you go by what everyone says, make one patch a red raspberry patch and another patch a black raspberry patch so that they don't share diseases. But the reason I brought this up is because red raspberries and black raspberries actually grow a little bit differently. Black raspberries are going to grow really, really, really tall, and the cane is then going to get so heavy that it's going to dip over and tip root into the soil, kind of creating a little rainbow. So pruning those raspberries are going to be different. Regardless of the color of raspberry, I'm going to be taking out old canes that fruited last year. This is going to leave room for all of those new canes to grow and fruit this year. Then I'm going to thin out those canes to leave room for airflow and sunlight. I usually do not like canes to be too close together. I like them to be about 4 or 5 inches apart if I can do that. I have a step-by-step video on the entire process that I posted last year in February. I think it's time for me to post that again because I've already been getting questions about pruning raspberries. I just haven't done it yet this year because we've been under 8 inches of snow and ice. But finally, that's starting to melt as of today, so hopefully I can get to that really soon. Next, I'm going to turn my focus to soil health. Everybody wants to know how I amend my soil, and honestly, it's very simple. Each year, I will add compost, dried leaves, and a little bit of nitrogen. Usually that comes from blood meal where I'll just sprinkle it on the top. This year though, I have to be a little careful because I did heavily mulch with wood chips. And those wood chips, if they break down, can take nitrogen out of the soil. So this year I might want to consider moving those wood chips before I amend any part of my soil. That's going to be a different process. I'm thinking through it as I'm speaking, and I'm going to have to take extra care about that this year. I might even do a little extra research because I'm going to be honest, those wood chips really did break down over the winter. So I'm going to have to see whether or not I want to try and do that. But as you can see, I usually keep it very, very simple. This year is a little bit of a curveball with the wood chips, but to be honest, I have had great soil for the last 7 years. I've kept it very simple, adding compost, nitrogen, and sometimes I'll add a little bit of extra vermiculite if I can't see it readily in the soil. The vermiculite's just going to help with drainage. I'm also going to consider whether that bed had a heavy feeder in it the season before. Anything with squash or tomatoes is probably going to be devoid of a lot more nitrogen than something that had beans or peanuts in it. I use those two very specifically because they are actually going to be providing more nitrogen into the soil after they're gone. So I might add less nitrogen to beds that had legumes in them and more nitrogen to things that had like potatoes. Potatoes are such heavy feeders. It's just something to consider. And to be honest, the compost is going to take care of a lot of that anyway. My favorite compost is leaf grow, and I know that a lot of people cannot find it. I think it's just local to Maryland. But if you find leaf grow, grab as much of it as you can because it is my favorite soil amendment. If last year's soil wasn't up to par, get that soil test and send it over to your local extension. Sometimes there's a small fee with that, so keep that in mind. Then I'm going to make a call and ask for some wood chips to be delivered. We actually get our wood chips for free. They bring them in a huge dump truck and they dumped them into our driveway last year, and we had wood chips for months. This year, I'm going to say absolutely no driveway. Please do it into our side yard so that we can actually park in our driveway. But that mulch is going to help tremendously in my garden. First, it's going to go in our walkways. Our walkways are actually pretty good right now because we've been mulching them for the last 7 years. And so it's very thick in our walkways, but even still, sometimes those weeds will pop up through it. So then that's when I use paper grocery bags. I cut them up, I lay them down, and I put the mulch on top. Then I make sure to wet everything so it stays, but this method has worked like beautifully over the last few years. I know that a lot of people like to bring their own grocery bags to the grocery store. I don't do that because I always get paper bags instead of plastic bags, of course. And the paper bags then go into my garden. So I feel like I'm not actually wasting anything. And actually, my local grocery store, the cashier and he's also a farmer, and we talk about gardening all the time. And so whenever he sees me, he's like, paper? I'm like, yes, paper, please. We collect them all throughout the winter so that we can have a huge stack full in the spring. I'm also going to use those wood chips again in the asparagus beds and also around any of my seedlings once I plant them. This next step is not going to be happening in the garden, but it's super important this time of year. Right now, I'm actually getting ready to pot up all of my seedlings. This includes my brassicas, broccoli, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, and my celery and any of my herbs that I planted early. I'm going to pot them up when they have 2 sets of true leaves, which some of them do already, and I'm going to make sure that I dip them into Organic Rev, which is a growth stimulant. This is the one that I like the most. I'm not sponsored by them at the moment. But I dip them into that Organic Rev and then I pot them up, and they usually take off very quickly. I like to do this now because I'm going to be planting those pretty soon, within the next month and a half or so. The boost that the Organic Rev is going to give them is going to allow them to get nice and healthy and big by the time that they go out into the garden in late March, early April. I'm going to be honest, this step does take a lot of time and energy, but it is absolutely crucial. Also, I'm starting all of my peppers this weekend so that they can get that head start that they need. But I've already started, again, all of my brassicas and my onions and a few herbs like cilantro and thyme. And then in a few weeks, I'll start tomatoes and all of the rest of my herbs and flowers. All of these things happen indoors. However, they are essential if I would like the garden of my dreams. All of these chores will happen indoors, but I really don't mind because it means that I get to spend some time in my greenhouse, which again, I am very lucky to have. Even if I wasn't in my greenhouse, this is something that I really enjoy. Something about the monotonous task of potting up and planting seeds really helps clear my brain. And sometimes I'll listen to a podcast or possibly watch a show while I'm doing it. It's some me time that's necessary but cathartic. Another inside chore is going to be checking all of my seeds. Now, I already did this at the end of December, early January, but if you haven't done that, make sure that you do it before you go out to plant your seeds. There's nothing worse than going out to your garden and getting ready to plant those watermelon seeds and realizing you only have 2. To be honest, 2 seeds is probably more than enough, but you understand what I'm saying. Inventory your seeds now, order them. They do take some time, especially if you're ordering online. Also consider that you may need some extra seeds just in case things do not germinate. I'm specifically thinking about peppers. Peppers sometimes take a very long time to germinate, and you want those extra seeds just for a little bit of reassurance. I am somebody who definitely overseeds and then thins later. I like to make sure that I have enough of the varieties that I want to grow. And then I am the crazy person that has 1,000 seedlings because, of course, all of them germinate when you have enough. But it's always the rule that when you don't have enough, nothing germinates. So I like to make sure I have enough to overseed and thin later. So I do recommend that you have enough that you can overseed. You'll always feel better about having too much rather than too little. And consider, are there any varieties that you want to try that are new to you this year? I know seed catalogs are amazing. Look through them and order what you want now because there's a lot of sales going on right now. I think seed companies find any reason to hold a sale because everyone knows people are buying seeds right now. Order them now at the discount rather than later when you're really crunched for time. This next step is so crucial. I'm going to make sure that I plan out where every single thing is going in my garden. This is huge. Map out where everything is going so that there's no confusion later. And map out not only the spring, but also the summer and the fall. There are some spring crops that are going to be done by the end of May, maybe early June. What are you going to put in that bed afterwards? Are you going to put in something that's going to last all the way to fall? Are you going to put in another quick crop so that you can then plant something else for the fall? Things like lettuce are only going to be growing in the spring and the fall. So what are you going to grow in between? Also consider crop rotation. What was in that bed last season? I'm actually on a 4-year crop rotation for tomatoes because they tend to get very diseased in my garden. So I make sure the tomatoes are not planted in a garden bed until 4 years later. That's really important for me. And again, I also recognize that I have a lot of privilege in that I have a big garden space and I'm able to do that. Consider companion planting. Where are you going to put all those herbs and flowers? Are they going to be in their own pots? Are you going to put them next to annuals or maybe even some perennials? And something specific for me is that I have 2 beds that are dedicated cold frames. I think it's silly to not plant anything during the summertime, but in the winter, I absolutely want to make sure that I have winter crops in there. And those winter crops have to go in there by September 1st. So when I'm considering what I'm planting in the spring, it has to be a pretty quick crop, something that's not going to take more than 3, maybe 4 months. So I like to plant things like bush beans, peas, cucumbers. All of these are going to grow really fast and then they're going to come out once they're done. I also like to plant carrots in my cold frames in the spring because I can get at least 5 months of those carrots growing before they have to come out in September. The way I keep track of all of this is actually on spreadsheets on my computer. I have a tab for each year so that I can go back 3 or 4 years to see what's been in that bed for all that time. I also like to plant garlic in beds that had legumes in there before because once again, legumes add nitrogen back into the soil, which makes the garlic, which is a heavy feeder, grow a lot more successfully. Of course, I'm going to be inventorying any tools or trellises or cages that I have. Anything that maybe is worn out from last season or broke over the harsh cold winters in the shed. I'm going to be replacing things now, not when they break in the middle of the summer. I'm going to be replacing or replenishing any fertilizers or seed starting mix or any soil amendments that I might have used last season. Taking inventory now helps me to see exactly where I am and what I need to purchase now. Next, I'm going to head over to my strawberry beds. My strawberries grow runners. Those runners head outside of the beds and they usually plant themselves right in the middle of the walkways. The end of February and early March is when I like to transplant all of those walkway strawberry plants back into the bed. And last year I actually added a few into pots and I sold them. It was pretty successful, so I might do that again this year. This is going to increase my yield, but it's also going to keep my walkways cleaner because right now they are filled with strawberries. All next to that bed, you can barely walk. And if I let those go, those plants will just produce more runners and it will grow and grow until it's out of control. So I do a little maintenance now, a little plant control now to save me some heartache for later. Although a garden full of strawberry plants doesn't sound too bad. I plant my potatoes on March 17th. It's St. Patrick's Day. It's easy to remember. March 17th is when those potatoes are going in the ground, so I have to do a little preparation for that ahead of time. Potatoes need to form eyes before they're put into the ground, and in order to do that, I like to cut them up and then I put them in a box so that they can chit out. Basically, that just means they're sprouting and they're showing their eyes. This gives the potatoes a little bit of a head start before they go into the ground. This doesn't take me that long, but it is crucial to me getting an earlier potato harvest, so I'll do it every year. I will say that the chitting out process takes anywhere from 7 to 10 days, so I don't really need to worry about this until we get into early March, which honestly is right around the corner. And something that's definitely optional but might be worth your time is setting goals for yourself this year. What do you want to grow more of this year? What do you want to focus on in your garden this year? By setting your focus on a couple of key things in the garden, it allows you to be more intentional with what you're doing. It also feels great when you actually accomplish that goal. For me, a goal of mine this year is to focus more on herbs. I want to have more dried herbs in my pantry going into next winter. So by setting my focus on those herbs, I can be more intentional about making sure I dehydrate them and store them properly. And I know that future Kristen is going to thank me. Getting ready for the garden is not glamorous, but I do think it is exciting. What you're doing right now is the foundation for your future success. I'm a big planner, so knowing that what I'm doing now is potentially giving me those huge harvests just makes me so excited. Having a clean space and a clear plan makes the spring and the summer so much easier. If you're preparing for your garden right now, I'd love to know what's at the top of your list. Do you have any goals for this year? Are they different from mine? If your garden prep is different from mine, I would love to know how. And if you want to support what I do here, head on over to my Fourth Wall shop. Each purchase directly supports this podcast. And again, if you want those garden to table recipes, head on over to my BonusView. I just posted a harvest to table dinner that was the best. It was creamy tomato orzo soup. Oh my gosh, it was so good. I actually can't wait to make it again. Thank you for being here and thank you for growing alongside me. Until next time, go and grow something very good.